Okay. I can't say let's take a seat because they're all taken. But it's really stimulating to see you all here. We had our curiosity open at the opening session. Now we'll have our hearts and minds engaged in this change journey. I think the 2 days here could have this title of engaging our hearts and minds in a change journey. Let me introduce you to the chair of this first interactive session at the Global Peter Drucker Forum, Tiffani Bova, growth advisor, best-selling author, growth IQ, experience, mindset. Tiffani, very welcome to the forum.
Thank you. Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for, there's a couple seats up here if anybody who's standing is looking for some seats. About 10 minutes ago, this room was empty, and we were all like, well, we'll have a conversation and see. And then all of a sudden, everyone showed up. It's great. Well, as mentioned, my name is Tiffani Bova. It's really a pleasure to be here. This is my second Drucker Forum. The first one was a virtual during the pandemic, and so it's lovely to see everybody in real life. But this isn't about me. This is about our wonderful panel of esteemed colleagues that are going to share both internal company learnings as well as advice on what they are doing in order to engage the hearts and minds of their people as we engage on these journeys. One stat I want to sort of start the conversation off with is back in 2019, the average enterprise was doing about a half a dozen transformation projects a year. In 2021, and towards the end and the beginning of 2022, the number of transformation projects that company was doing had doubled a year. And our people are the ones that have to actually execute on those transformation projects. And so we want to make sure that this is really about how do we get people engaged, willing, and committed to the purpose of the organization, because change is not slowing down, as we heard from the first panel. And I think that this discussion will open up even further discussion from there. We have some mics in the room, so please feel free to just go stand in front of one of those mics, and we will stop and ask a question from the audience, or you can raise your hand. We may even have a runner. So without further ado, let's start at the end. I'm going to have everybody introduce themselves, where they work, and maybe just a quick thought on why they were excited to do this panel. So Patrick, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, very happy to. Hi, my name is Patrick Guggenberger, partner at McKinsey. I think I'm the only local one here, so the way
it took him 8 minutes to get here.
8 minutes, so this was quite nice. Not used to that, actually. So in my daily work, I actually support organizations, especially consumer-facing organizations, to really unleash their organizational potential. And in doing that, of course, I saw many transformations and saw them succeed but also fail, and the people component in there is so important, and very excited to be here today and also share a few of my learnings and my perspective on the topic.
Excellent. Thank you, Tony.
Hi, my name is Tony Park. I actually flew 24 hours to get here, so we've gone from shortest to maybe the longest. I work for a company called Toss. We're the largest fintech company based in Seoul, South Korea. And I really wanted to, why did I fly 24 hours to be here? First of all, Peter Drucker had a very profound impact on my career early on, and he was one of the reasons that I really started to get passionate about this idea of management. The second one is Peter Drucker also believed that a company or institution should help the society at large. And I'll get into a little bit of what we're doing at TOS, but we're also engaging in that mission. We're going through a 2,300-person experiment. I was very struck by the opening session. In essence, our philosophy is, what would happen if a company had no managers? How could it run? Could it run? Could it be successful? We want to take this idea and say, we're paying someone to essentially manage people and projects. Well, what if people and the employees could manage themselves? And I'm happy to share what learnings, what failures that we've gone through. So thank you for having me here. And thank you for Tiffani and the rest of the panelists. We were just chatting before, and it's a really great group. So I think we'll get a lot out of today's session.
Excellent. Anjana, please.
Thank you. I'm pronouncing it well. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I go by Anj anyway. I'm Anjana Mistry. I'm the CFO and COO at Emergn. Earlier today, Alex was speaking on the other panel, so I won't tell you what our company does. What does. It will just be repeating myself. But Alex did speak about the ongoing challenges that leaders have in managing teams these days, and I wanted to talk a little bit more about that. We spoke about black swans earlier today. You know, we've had the wars, we've had the pandemic, we've had the change in the way people work. And these unforeseen challenges over the last few years, what it's teaching us is we need frameworks where we can actually take care of our people, where they feel valued and where they feel that they belong. So the 4 words that in this crazy environment that we've had to live through, the 4 words that we as a company have rallied behind to take care of our employees is belonging, surrounding, caring, and being aligned. That they're not your typical business words, but they're actually the words that actually ensure that our people know that we care about them and that they matter. So that's what I'm going to be talking about.
Thank you, Anj.
Thank you, Tiffani. Thank you, everyone. I feel bad with all the people who are standing or sitting here. I apologize for it. It reminds me of sometimes in classes at the university that I teach where there's a lot of interest about a subject and we wish we had a bigger room here. I've been teaching at Stanford University for over 25 years and its executive programs. And although I've spent all my life on the field of organizational and personal transformation, I still really look at this field as a beginner. And I don't mean this to be facetious. It's just truly an awesome area. So I'm just so excited to be in this panel with you, Tiffani, and everyone else. And I look forward to having great discussions.
Excellent. All right. Well, let's jump into it. And as I'm sure you can all understand, this is going to be extremely thought-provoking, get those beginners' mindsets flowing. So I'm going to start with you, Anj. You had mentioned very quickly about how you've been engaging your employees in a very pragmatic approach. And I think when we had our early discussion, you used that word pragmatic, and I wanted you to double-click on what that meant from an engagement perspective, because I think sometimes it isn't pragmatic. So maybe you could share a little bit of that.
Absolutely. What I wanted, for some of you who were here last year, Maud Bailey, the CEO of Sofitel, spoke about what happened during COVID with their hotels, and then how they used those hotels to use the Ukrainian, to house the Ukrainians that had been displaced. And what that did, it created a community and belonging for all of their company. And that because they felt bought into what the company was doing. So what we're, with the world, with everything going on with the world, with everybody being so disconnected, it's really important for us to kind of understand, what are we trying to do? And also, when people don't feel that they belong, what happens is there's no emotional tie to the company, to their colleagues, or anything like that. They feel as if, the quality of the work can die down. They kind of leave, go to other companies, they'll just jump. It doesn't matter, they're not loyal. And then the worst part of it is you find that people hide. So we found all of those things. So what we did as a company is we decided to surround our people. And this was so that they didn't feel isolated. We could take care of retention, and they could be the best that they could be, and also create that safe virtual environment. And what that means and what that translates to is 4 types of belonging. You've got global belonging, where you're part of something bigger than yourself. Your professional belonging, where you're taking care of your skills and being very intentional about it. Then you've also got your location belonging, so your culture, and you're part of the teams and the communities and the CSR activities that you're doing. And the last one was, I've gone blank now, global, professional, location, and business belonging, which is the quality of the work that you're doing. And that's what we rallied around last year, well, through these years, and we still rally around, because it's not forgotten, it's not one and done, and you have to continue doing these things. And there's different activities that we continue to do every year. So that's what we did and how we broke it down, because you can't attack it in one big beast. So that's what we did there.
I'd be interested in any of the rest of you on the word belonging, because we often hear words like belonging or love the job, and it makes some, at least leaders that I've worked with, an organization I've worked with, they get a little uncomfortable. What does that mean? How do I create an environment or a culture where belonging means something to people? Because it may mean some very different things. I'm going to start with you, because at an educational level, right, you've got leaders that are coming to Stanford trying to either expand their horizons, be better leaders, move on in their career, whatever it might be. And some of these words must be being discussed. And how are they responding to things that maybe feel a little uncomfortable to them?
My latest research has been on elite organizations, and I've been really interested to see these amazing companies such as Amazon, Apple, Tesla, Microsoft. What is it about them that makes them so unique in terms of being a perpetual innovator and great in transformation? And what I found is that they are very strong on this concept called existential purpose. And by that I mean it's not just a mission statement that people just look at and laugh at, but it's truly something that people kind of connect to. For example, Tesla says we want to accelerate the world transition to sustainable energy. And when you think about the fact that they want to accelerate the world transition, that means what they've done is they opened their patents. So everybody could use any patent that Tesla would have. And you would think, how is that possible? They're going to catch up to you and so forth. Well, what they say in Tesla is that, that makes us to increase our innovation rate. Not just in per employee, absolute sense, and you just have to innovate faster and just get ahead of the competition before they kind of catch up to you and so forth. And when you go to those environments like Apple or Tesla or even Amazon, you feel like people are connected viscerally from the inside out to these organizations' mission. They look at it as sometimes death or life. They're just excited. They're passionate about it. And I think that sense of belonging and that sense of interest is what really intrigues me, because right now, as you know, the disengaged employees, according to Gallup poll, is costing us about $8.8 trillion, if you will. That's 9% of our GDP. And to create that belonging, to create that existential purpose, to connect people's inside out to the outside in, I think it's number one goal that leaders need to really work on.
What about you from a McKinsey standpoint?
So I think belonging for me is still something different than purpose. Both of them are super important. Based on our latest research, what we have seen is that, we have all seen the great resignation, especially in the US, where a large number of employees just quit without even having an alternative in mind what they want to do after that. And when we asked them why did they actually quit, they said it isn't for the money or the title, but there were many other reasons. And belonging came up as the number one reason why they actually quit in the end. And how you can create belonging is, through leadership. But we don't see that often in organizations. We see managers. They tell you what to do until when you need to do it, but they don't really listen to you. They don't show you how to do it, and therefore create a leadership culture, which also creates the sense of belonging which is needed. And I think going back to that and setting up those trainings for leaders, which now through cost cutting and all of those measures got reduced to a minimum. I think it's very important that this gets re-energized again, and that we give leaders the opportunity to also become real leaders and tell them how to do that.
Well, Tony, you've got an interesting environment, right, where it's self-regulated, which is, I don't know how many in the room would feel, let's do this. By a show of hands, how many of you in your own organizations would like no management? How many of you think if you had no management, the business would fall apart? Okay.
It's interesting, and to actually support what Patrick said, I'll give kind of an interesting anecdote. During COVID, like most of the countries and most companies, there was a requirement to work from home, and Korea had the same. It was not a mandate, but the government recommended that 30% of your population should work remotely. So. We just made an announcement. Because we don't have a manager and because it's a company, we don't manage downward. We didn't tell everybody, well, you got to work from home. We're going to assign the 30%. And a very interesting thing happened. So we said, let's just announce it and see what happens. And to what Patrick said, because there wasn't a person saying, you have to. I'm choosing you, you have to. We saw an interesting dynamic. The first week it happened, only 5% work from home. Because we also have another interesting dynamic, which is everybody has a company credit card. You can spend the card as you wish. Nobody audits that credit card. And so as that weeks went on, it started to go up between 5 and 10%. This went on for about 2 months. So finally, the COVID got really bad in Korea, and the government said, this is serious, we want 30%. So we said, team, we're not meeting our goal here, so if we have to, we will shut down the company. We'll shut down the office, so we'll force you guys to work from home. When we said that, the teams came to us and said, if you shut us down, we will go to a hotel, and we will just rent a conference room and work from that hotel, and we'll charge the company. And so, and this happened, we got about 50 requests from teams saying that's what they would do. So we, in fact, did not close the office down. And we never got more than 15% remote working. 85%, in the height of COVID, continued to come in the office. And the main reason was, this is our choice. This is what we want to do. We want to work together as a team, continue to do this because we believe we'll be the most productive in that way. And so it was an interesting dynamic. And even to this day, even though Korea has really embraced work from home, we still are about 80% coming into the office and 20% work from home. And those people who work from home, they come into the office about 3 days a week. And again, we never said, you have to be here 3 days a week. We're going to take attendance. We're going to see what happens. We're going to tie some incentive to that. We never had to do any of that. And it's been an interesting dynamic to continue to see how that's playing out.
Well, I think that there's so much in there. You know, I mean, different parts of the world that would not have been the case. But I think the way the teams rallied together and took ownership in the decision goes a long way in their willingness to say, I feel connected to the brand, right? I feel connected to the company. I care enough, I want to be there, not only for my fellow employees, but for the customers as well, sort of from an inside out. So I'd like to jump to you for just a second. When we talk about change journeys, you know, I think that the word journey has very different connotations depending on where you are in the organization. If you're in the marketing organization, a customer journey means one thing. If you're in HR, onboarding journey means something else, right? We're discussing this change journey that is usually led by managers, right? But there was a stat, tends to be a fairly old stat, but it was the average employee gets sort of their first promotion in their late 20s. And they don't show up or get offered their very first management training until their middle 30s. And so for the first 5 to 6 years of being a manager, they've never been trained. And so how do you reconcile this engagement of hearts and minds and lots of change happening where the people who are managing may not, in fact, actually have the skills needed for that change journey?
I'm going to go back to the earlier thing that you mentioned in terms of how many transformation projects that exist in each company. And when I hear like 12 transformation journeys in one company, the alarm goes on. You know, this just doesn't make sense. These portfolio of transformation need to be kind of put together. We need to be more holistic. We need to do these transformation in parallel because people have change fatigue. They're tired of all this flavor of the day change. You need to change on this. And people are just confused. So we need to have a way to kind of unify all this change. So that's number one. Number two, I really believe in terms of bringing this sense of, engaging minds and hearts, it's very important to create a volunteer armies of people. volunteer armies of people within the organization so they could work together in a very flat organization with very little, if you will, a hierarchy, so that they could solve and they could challenge some of the current, if you will, the ills of what I call the matrix. If you guys seen the movie, is at the end of the day, I always see organization as matrix, and I'm just looking at, okay, if you're a Neo or a Trinity, how would you actually go about changing that transformation? And at the end of the day, to me, the best type of training is not going to class, is actually experiential learning. So the best way to actually change culture is through projects, through these transformation efforts, but they all need to be unison, and you can't just have flavor of the month going at the employees, because our employees are burned out, they feel isolated, and the last thing you want to do is throw a new change project at them.
You nailed it.
Yeah.
The employees are saying we're burnt. We can't take the average human just to change their own personal behavior takes a little more than 60 days. And so if you have 12 change projects, when are you expecting them to actually absorb that change, especially if it's a change of behavior? And that stat specifically was on technology transformations, not cultural, organizational. So Patrick, we talk a lot about change, spend a lot of conversation, belonging, but it doesn't always work.
Yeah.
There are some failures along the way. And Amy Edmondson is here. She's got a great new book out on really embracing that sort of failure. But you've got some research on what are the core factors that lead to failure in this area? Because if you can identify what those core factors are, you can potentially avoid the pitfalls.
No, absolutely. And just to throw a number out there, when we look at transformations overall, and what we mean by that are really the larger transformational programs and not the little projects that happen within an organization, 70% of them actually fail to deliver the expected results. And I think that's a large number. So we can actually say organizations are not good in changing, and change is hard. And what we have found also in our research is that if you are systematic about change, and there's kind of a formula behind that, you can be 8 times more successful in achieving the results which you have set yourself beforehand. And there are actually 4 components to that. And let me maybe give you a little example to illustrate it a bit better. So the first one is around role modeling. And of course, that's nothing new. We all know leaders play an important role in every type of transformation. But just imagine if now an organization would tell its people, as of tomorrow, we would take the bike to work. No more cars, no public transportation, we would only take the bike. So how to go about it, right? And role modeling is kind of the first element, how you can make that successful. So if, for example, a month before you actually communicate, you see the key leaders of the organization to come to work by bike, independently of whether it snows or rains, this will send a message, and you will see that certain people within the organization will start to change their behavior. They will also say, wow, that's actually cool, I'll get healthier, and this makes sense. And suddenly more and more people will switch to bikes without actually communicating anything. So that's just natural. So that's 1. 2 is, so if we want to make them really change, there needs to be some type of communication. We call it fostering understanding and conviction. So if you don't tell employees what you actually want and what is going on, then they will never be able to actually, shift into the transformation program and help to deliver kind of the ambition. So, and here it's just important that you help them to understand why are we actually doing it. So not only the what, now we take bikes, but really help them to understand. So we do that for a sustainability reason. We want to get healthier as an organization, or whatever the reason might be. But they really need to buy into that so that they can change their underlying mindsets and behaviors in the end, and that they can change finally. The third bucket is around making sure that they actually can do it, right? So, and this is around providing the right tools and training them and giving the right capabilities. So if you don't know how to ride the bike, you just can't do it, right? So it will fail. If you don't have a bike in terms of tools, you can't come to work by bike. So simple reason, but the analogy is, so if you don't have the right skills and capabilities in a transformation program, it won't work. And the last area is really around enforcing mechanisms in the end, which will help you to make sure that things in the end happen. So there are positive incentives on the one side, so that people who change earlier will have certain benefits, and I'm not talking necessarily about monetary benefits, so many other things, but there also needs to be consequence management in the end. So if things don't happen and you came to work by bike, it was snowing, maybe not really pleasant, and then you see like 3 others that came by car, then you ask yourself, so why am I actually doing it? So if we take all of those 4 lenses together, and as I said, if you do that consequently and you make change systematically, then you will be 8 times more likely to succeed in your transformational program. And I think that's quite mind-blowing.
What about the rest of you? Anybody have feelings? Tony, any feelings on, self-regulated with no management, and then there's failure? Who's identifying that failure, if you will? And I put that in air quotes, right?
Yeah.
That something's not working and it needs to be course-corrected, adjusted, maybe stopped doing altogether. Who's paying attention to that, and how do you operationalize that?
It's really interesting. I'm sitting next to Patrick because I'm just nodding, because a lot of what Patrick said is true for us in that theoretical of not having a lot of management. So what we see in our organization is ideas come up organically. And it doesn't matter if this was part of your job. A lot of ideas in our organization come from people outside of the group that actually has accountability for producing that outcome. And so what happens is, just like Patrick talked about the bicycle, somebody creates a bike, has an idea, and other people just start naturally navigating to that idea. And so we do everything by Slack, and so it's visible. There's 100% transparency to projects, to work streams, and everybody can see. You can jump into a project if you want to, and you organically create that. And so when the failure happens, it's identified by the team members. And you'll have, whether it could be the CEO or the CTO, we do have a few C-level people, but their roles are not to say, well, I created the strategy, everybody just follow and execute. It's really them just being another member of that team and saying, I'm just another voice, another idea. So when a failure gets identified, it really is identified by the team. And we decided, one of the things that we wanted to encourage was, let's have more failure, not to fail more, but we wanted to encourage having bigger ideas, bolder ideas. And so we actually put it in our core values. We want to encourage failure. So even though people are accountable and they fail, they're not reassigned. We don't give them some sort of negative course correction for them. We really encourage them and say, okay, get on to the next project and the next breakthrough. So it's interesting just to kind of mirror what Patrick was saying theoretically.
How about you, Ange?
So I'm going to take a different view of all of that. So if I think about what you gentlemen have just said, to rally around something, you'd have to be philosophically aligned. So we, as a company, everybody knows, HR research tells you that the traditional performance management doesn't work. You have to do something different. You have to bring in professional skills plus the soft skills. So what we've got at Emergn is, and we've just implemented it this year. We've been talking about it and bits have been done about it, which is the Incredible Talent Framework. And the one that is core to all of them is being philosophically aligned. So if you're aligned in what you're trying to get done, whether it's the company's mission, a project, to making sure it's a success, and you're thinking about it in a way that it's much bigger than you, it's not about you, it's about the thing, whatever you're trying to do, then that's really, really important. And there's a couple of other principles that we follow under the Incredible Talent Framework, which is, if you get the philosophically aligned bit right, then that means that you've got command of the business. You're going to be following up and following through because you know what you're doing and you're going to just get on with it. You're in the right job, and you're just going to be consistent throughout it all. So we've actually switched to doing that, and it's taken it's a completely different lens, but people are understanding that it's the personal side of it, not just the skill. Do you have that certification? Do you have? And linking it all back to the human part of you being in a company and the belonging. Then if you have all those soft pieces of the incredible talent, because you want everybody to be incredible talent in your company, otherwise you're not going to get incredible work. But incredible talent can mean different things for different people. And that's what we've been going for.
I'm just going to build on what Anjana just talked about, and that is Tim Cook of Apple says if you make sure that every employee is clear about what is expected from them, you create meaning for that employee. I mean, that's how he defines meaning. And oftentimes in organizations, people are not clear what is expected of them. With all this change effort, with all these different things, with 10 priority, what is your priority used to be just one. And then we kind of changed it. Oh, these 10 things are your priority. And we're confusing people. I think that clarity is important. One thing we haven't talked about, that at least what I found in my research that shows the 1,000 organizations that I've studied, is that in cases where organizations bring in an armies of outsiders, oftentimes what I find is the transformation is not successful because the people, insiders, feel alienated. For transformation to succeed, it's very important that you create a movement that truly, be able to recruit and make sure that there is volunteer army within the organization. Number one, at the middle level, because I think middle level is an opportunity for you to transform. They have 360 degrees of view of both the leadership and the front line, but also the front line and so forth. So I've seen successful transformation sometimes get up to 20% of people engaged, involved, and really part of the authorship of transformation. And to me, that really, it may not give you the fast results that you can get from outside, but you can actually get people to develop talent, elevate their talent, and find the leaders of your future. I think that's the Trojan horse of this transformation, is you can find out who the future leaders are and be able to promote them.
Yes, Tony.
In the spirit of the theme of this interactive session, engaging hearts and minds, I might say something a little controversial here. I think from my experience and my perspective working in Korea, I don't know if it's possible to engage hearts. You might be able to engage minds, but heart might be different. And my logic, or the logic that I have based on my experiences, I've talked to a lot of team members, and sometimes they can have a clear understanding of the vision, the mission, but they're just not engaged. For them, this is a job, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with the person who says, I want to come here, my goal is something different than to pour my everything out for this company. And so when we started to see a little bit of this, what we started to think was, let's hire the person who actually is naturally engaged to the mission, who, when they get a mission, they will go and perform at their very best. And so we've sort of tinkered around with different ways to identify this kind of person. So in our organization, in our culture, I think the only way that it works is that you have somebody who's very self-motivated, self-regulated. They actually don't need a manager to tell them, hey, come into work every day. Here's your mission. I don't need to press our values on you every single moment, because you're the kind of person that once they know what they want to do, then they're all in. And so it's just an interesting take on whether it's truly possible to engage a heart that says, this coming here is not my everything. It's not even my 50%. So how do you really engage that population of people? And there's nothing wrong with that. It just may not be the right fit for our company.
Well, I think that highlights a really important point. Everybody's motivated by very different things, right? Some people may be motivated by money. Some people may be motivated by the mission and values of the organization. Some may be motivated by it's a job. Some may be, there are lots of reasons. And if you just blanket that everyone's motivation is the same for engaging their hearts and minds, you have to, I'd have to say it's probably not at all the heart, but I understand your point. That also requires a very self-aware leader who understands how to actually understand the difference of what is motivating the individuals. Anything around that where, how do you, as a leader, you rattled off a number of organizations, mostly in tech. Is it a great storyteller? Is it an empathetic leader? Is it someone who is able to communicate well, that's transparent, that's trustworthy? All those words. Is there something that you've seen in your own organization that really lends itself to success in this engaging of the hearts and minds? Anj?
Okay, thank you. In a previous role, not with Emergn, I was working in India for a couple of years, and we had to do a big transformation, and they'd been trying to do this for 10 years. There was company was huge. I'm not going to name the company, but what was happening was they kept parachuting people in from New York, and they kept parachuting corporate people in, and they just didn't understand the culture and how to do it in India. And then what happened was I landed in India. I got sent there because I did want to work there. I wasn't born there. And a joke for the room is they called me the pretend Indian because I wasn't born there. So I'm walking into that, and then I'm a woman. So I've got that going on. So you walk in, you have this mess. Nobody can deal with it. All these random people from New York keep turning up. And then I just sat the team down, and I just said to them, what is this, and what are we trying to get done? So we broke it down into work streams. I'm talking 10, 15 years ago now. We broke it down into work streams. Then New York said, okay, we'll give you work stream owners for each piece because it hits a different part of the company. And I said, nope, they're going to own it. They've helped me build what the solution is. They're going to own it so that when we walk away from this, they will continue owning it. I still get emails every year when they pass their compliance and tax audits, just to say, we passed. I got, emails from the government basically saying, will you teach the rest how to do it? And obviously, I can't do that, but other companies, can you give them some coaching? And I said, use your own people. Plain to you, use your own people. It will work, because then they own it here, and they feel very proud of it, that they got it done.
So one of the most rewarding experiences I've ever worked on was within the county I'm in, Santa Clara County, where Silicon Valley is. In the health system, we created the first center where people could actually get sex changes. And we were talking about creating a forum by which we could actually raise funding, raise awareness of this clinic, if you will. And one of the things I suggested was, why don't we just bring the patients and have the employees and have the stakeholders kind of listen to the patients. So again, we're a county, so we bring in vulnerable population. We brought in a homeless person who was actually talking about what she was going through and the beating she got, the bullying she got. I mean, the entire room was in tears. And it created such a unifying mission for everyone to make sure that not only the center works, and also she talked about the fact that, look, this is my family. This primary care doctor, the surgeon, this is the only family I have. I live in from house to house, a lot of times homeless. And, I'm going back to what Tony said. I understand some people just see their work as work, but I'm just actually going to take this step further, not just engaging minds and heart. I even say we should engage souls too. And by soul, if you look at the word dictionary soul, it means the intensity of your emotional and your intellectual involvement. So I also take this even a step further and say the intensity of it. And when you bring your customers and your employees could understand the pain point of your customers, boy, that would get people fired up in terms of, wow, this is something we want to really focus on and so forth. So there are lots of ways where you can create cadence, you can create momentum, because oftentimes with these transformations, people lose their energy. And it's understandable because we get burned out. And you want to be able to have a refueling station where they just get excited again and then go back to their mission.
Absolutely. Any questions from the audience? Yes. Would you mind stepping up right behind you? There's a mic. Thank you.
Really interesting discussion. I enjoyed it a lot. I have two questions to Tony. You mentioned about the value of your company. I'm seeing it here on the website. We grow through courageous and quick failures. Mm-hmm. Can you expand on that? Can you give us some examples? What kind of failures happen? And the second one is, you said there is no management. So what's the role of the C-level employees in the company? What do they do?
Yeah, thank you for the question. There's been so many failures on the product because we are a fintech company. So if you just think about PayPal, we're basically the Korean version of PayPal. There's so many product failures that happen. There's so many shifts of strategy that happen, as Patrick was talking about getting on the bike. I think there's too many to kind of talk about, but the failures happen on a daily basis. And there might be a product owner who's building some release and it just doesn't get the traction. It doesn't bring the user into the platform. So there's a lot of that happens that we identify early, and then we triage, and then we decide how are we going to move on from that. In terms of the C-level, it's interesting. So we have I believe we have a very charismatic CEO. He's a very, if you ever Google him, his name is Seung-gun Lee, SG Lee. He was actually a dentist by trade. In Korea, being a dentist is a very lucrative profession. He was one of the best dentists in Korea, but his heart was to be an entrepreneur. So he tried to start his own company. He failed 8 times, and TOS was the 9th time that he actually succeeded, and now we're worth about $15 billion. And so I'm not sure our culture could, I don't even want to test it, I'm not sure that our culture could survive without him. He is that meaningful to the culture. And one of the things that we're going through today is the company's now almost 2,500 people, 2,300 people plus. And we were having lunch and we were just saying, we don't recognize half these people. We don't recognize 70% of these people. And I think that is becoming a risk for us. And so we're now thinking about how do we maybe split up, compartmentalize so that people know each other better. So the role of the C-level isn't to manage. It isn't even to create a strategy. Their role is, to be honest, we have people who were in the company for so long and they have 15, 20 years of experience. And some of their organizations are so large, like we have a CTO, his organization is about 400 people. So we needed to give him some title just to separate him from the other 400 people. But he doesn't sit there and create a roadmap or strategy for the technology group. And SG, our CEO, doesn't create a strategy for the entire company either. That is all done at the employee level. They create the strategy, they create the execution, and ultimately he's there really as a guardian of our culture. That's probably his greatest value, and his charismatic nature. And he started the company, so he really was involved in the first 300 to 400 hires, and now he's really making sure that our culture continues to stay together as we expand.
So Tony, how do you kind of prioritize when things are coming up? What gets selected, what doesn't get selected? And then are there dominant communities, and then there's communities that just kind of tag along? How do you kind of manage all of that?
Yeah, there are dominant communities. For example, we're at the stage of our growth where we really want to become profitable. So now we call them silos. The silos that are driving business revenue, they are becoming the dominant kind of more important voice in the company. But the interesting thing is we wouldn't use the word important. We kind of look at ourselves as a sports team. And I love soccer, so if you have a great soccer team, there are some times where a player has an amazing game and will score many of the goals, becomes an important person. That's kind of the way we operate as a sports team. We know that at various games, different people will step up, different silos will step up, and we don't go, oh, well, let's just immediately pay that person the most money. We will just say, hey, great game. We'll have another game, and hopefully everybody steps up so that ultimately the goal is to win the championship. So that's how we determine whether it's very organic. Yeah, and when you're dealing with the business, it becomes very clear what should we move toward and focus all of our energy toward, and what should then play more of in the back role.
Did that answer your question? Okay, excellent. Yes.
We talk about the involvement and the engagement of employees. I'd like to also mention one elephant in the room, and that is we also need involvement and engagement of leaders. The other session where we were attending, they talked about the apathy of leadership. And I think, especially with transformation, leaders need to take responsibility. And this is not something you delegate. Part of why failure happens in transformation is leaders try to delegate the job of transformation. Leaders need to lead transformation. And the other thing that I've also noticed in transformation is a lot of leaders bring in their childhood drama that they didn't deal with into work. And oftentimes, it's their blind side, so it's right behind their back. Everybody sees it, but they don't see it, right? And oftentimes what I've noticed, and this is really, really interesting, is that the transformation of the organization is limited and curtailed by those limits that the leader have, the key leader.
We all want to know what kind of drama and childhood drama we're talking about. We really want to know.
We all have trauma. We all have had
List
trauma.
a
If you
few.
tell me you don't have trauma as a
So
childhood,
give
I
us a
say,
few. Come on.
no, you mine?
Well, the examples you were given, please do.
You want me to talk about my trauma?
Okay, go for
Okay,
it.
I'll do that. I'll do that. You want me to, should I do it? No.
No.
Okay. No, but seriously.
Too
we
early,
need
no alcohol. No.
That's true. That's
We
true.
really need to, I'm serious, we really need this. We had a dinner last night, and one of the things we talked at the dinner, with Tim Brown was there as an MC, we talked about the fact that, I asked these leaders, how many of you have coaches? And this lady from France raised her hand. She's a top executive. She said, I have a coach, and I also have a psychologist. Mm. And that was amazing to me because she was some of the most articulate, some of the most enlightened person in the room. And one of the things we discussed is that, we need coaches. Great athletes, great soccer players have coaches. And yet a lot of our leaders don't have coaches. So I think it's important to address some of these things so that you can be limitless in terms of possibilities that your organizations have.
Let me maybe just challenge you, please. Let me just challenge the one idea that we need to have a certain title or role to take over leadership. And I think what I've seen now more and more is that everyone in the organization can take over the responsibility in terms of leadership. And let me just give you one example there. I recently talked to the CPO of Lego. I think we all know the company. Building bricks, and they wanted to get a bit inspired by their customers, which are kids. And they are very creative in the way how they build kind of their thing is with the bricks, and in the end they also have continuous learning. So they try to replicate it within their organization, and they said, let's create something which we call leadership playground. And the idea behind that is the following, that everyone in the organization, independent of hierarchy, ranks, location, can nominate him or herself to be part of this leadership playground to participate in some transformational efforts or projects. And by doing that, what they created is a very inclusive culture and environment, which again, if we say about how can we engage hearts and minds, this is exactly the way how you make sure that people feel that they have a say, they can actually contribute, and they make sure that it's not always a top-down decision from the management, as you say, but you make sure that the ideas also come bottom up and are created through all of the people within the organization. Everyone can contribute. So I found it very inspiring, kind of a creative idea how you can engage hearts and minds.
And I think there's a very large self-awareness, which I mentioned a couple times, is critical for those blind spots. But in some research that I did as well over the course of 2 years, found that when it came specifically to employees, that organizations will capture a lot of information on employees, and 87% of them globally do nothing with the data they collect. So the employees spend the time answering the survey. Sometimes it's really long. And then the company gets it. Who knows who looks at it? Nothing happens. So then the next time the survey comes out, the employees go, well, why am I going to spend this time? Like, I'm not going to give my heart. Why should I care when they don't care enough? So what do you think, what do you think is driving that disconnection between the leader and the employee, especially in large organizations that spread is much bigger? There may be, not in your case, but there may be 30 layers between that individual employee on the manufacturing plant floor and the CEO. How Why do you think that's happening, this disconnection, and how do you think leaders can get closer to those frontline employees to understand what really does motivate and will get them more engaged?
I think that I heard it in the first session, the word of trust. I think these days employees, I think when the management stands up on a town hall and says, well, here are the results of the engagement survey, and we're going to do this, this, and this, I think there's a sense of, I've heard this before. And you guys said, oh, we're going to do training. No offense to training, but we're going to do training of our managers because our managers can't seem to manage people, and they don't see the results. So it feels like Groundhog's Day, the same thing over and over. And I think the trust of the action items has gone very low, and it feels like you're just giving me corporate spin now. And I want to see real results, and I think companies haven't been able to deliver on those real results.
Fair point. Yes, Patrick.
One more perspective. Whenever we talk about transformation, I truly have not an incremental evolution in mind, but a shock which comes to an organization. And when we talk about shocks, then what I've seen with many of the larger transformational programs, that the senior leadership wants to be a bit quiet at the beginning because they themselves don't really know where the journey is going towards. So I think the mistake which is done there is that you're not honest kind of to your people in the organization, but you try to keep that in the close circle for too long, and then kind of you lose the trust of the organization. And I think building this bridge and making sure as a leader that at the very beginning you just say, we have problem A, we need to fix it, we don't yet know how to do it, we are working on it, we will involve you and keep you updated. This has, we found that this is way more inspiring and engaging for employees than waiting for a year. Rumors anyway start to spread, people don't feel involved, and at the end, bringing then this transformation successfully over the finish line is much more difficult.
Well, there's some McKinsey research out. I'm not going to put you on the spot that you may not know it because you put a lot out. But there was research, it was over a decade of transformation and what was it focused on. And 10 years ago, it was operational efficiency, cost reduction, et cetera. And only recently has transformation actually been focused on employees, like improving their day-to-day. And a part of that is most definitely the pandemic really shined a light on the lack of investments that many organizations have made towards that employee set. Why do you think that is? That sort of transformation tends to not, and change, right? This journey of change is very focused maybe on profitability, operations, IT, and along the way, the people are sort of being dragged behind.
Look, I think with all of the economic shocks and personal shocks, which we have seen now over the past 2 to 3 years, the executive team of those large corporations are also very much under pressure, right? So they need to deliver the financial results, they get pressure from shareholders. And so there are many questions kind of they need to answer. And on the one side, there's of course the focus on engaging employees again, but on the other side, they need to deliver kind of the results. So I think what's done wrong there again is that, within this isolated circle of, too many top managers and too little involvement of the overall organization, transformation programs are designed, and then in the end, they might not deliver what they actually require to. And maybe let me give you one more example how it's done differently. I recently talked to Paul Weihrauch, the CEO of Mars Petcare, a huge organization, 140,000 employees. And we interviewed him, so that's why I can share that here. And he said, Patrick, so what we need to do is that we need to listen more to with our heads and our hearts, and how we did it in our transformation from Mars Petcare was that we involved at the very early stage many young leaders. We sent them out across the entire world. We made sure that they visited the best running organizations, and they came back with a lot of ideas. And we made sure that we include them in our transformation effort. So they became kind of the leaders of this transformation, and made sure that in the end they actually could deliver.
And that's it, right? You ask, they show up, they answer. Management leaders change because of what they've heard, and now you get this connection of hearts and minds, I think. Any comments on why you think there might be a disconnection between what the leaders think is happening in the organization versus what the employees actually is happening? Ange, go ahead.
I go after.
Thank you. Going back to the trust conversation and transparency, how much are you transparent with your company? And it's such an incredible balance that you have to play there. And that plays into all of this stuff we're talking about now. It's the transparency element. And if you're transparent too much, they don't know what to do with it. And they sometimes react badly to it or don't know how to interpret it. You're not transparent enough, they think you're hiding something and you're not including them. So finding that balance is really important. And then the other thing that we our company, we fess up to our failures. As leaders, if we've done something and it didn't work, and it was me that did it, or Alex that did it, we fess up to it. We own it, and we'll tell the company that this didn't work, we're going to do something different. We own it. And I think you get a lot of respect for just standing up there and say, I got that wrong. And I'm not always right, even though I'm in a leadership role. So that's important. And then the final thing I'm going to say is upskilling. There's a talent war out there right now, and it's really hard. It takes 3 to 6 months to hire. The probation period, getting them onboarded, all of that stuff. So why wouldn't you upskill the existing team that you have? And if you upskill the existing team, then you're going to get loyalty because you've invested in them. You want them to be better. You're trying to keep them in the company, and you're trying to keep them there because they were there for a reason at the beginning, and some people won't make it. But a lot of people will try to make it if you put the effort in with them.
Absolutely. Any other questions from the audience? Yes. He's just going to stand up. Do you want to go up there, or would you like her to bring a mic?
I have a loud mouth.
Okay, then. No, go ahead, sir. Go ahead, and then she'll follow you.
Yeah, hi, Christian Basin. So I really enjoyed the panel conversations. It seems to me that there's, in a way, two very big different paradigms across the panel. One is the traditional way of seeing management, and we talk about leading from the top down and hierarchy and levels of management and so on. And the other one is what Tony really is sharing is a radically different vision of what leadership management organizations might be. And my question to the panel is really, are we at a tipping point? Are we at the end of an era, maybe even the era of I wouldn't say of Drucker, but at least of a 20th century management model, and are we on the cusp of something radically different or not?
At the Drucker Forum. Way to go.
I don't see the split that you mentioned. I believe that, as the panelists all talked about this, transformation is bottom down, bottom up, top down effort, working together, creating a movement, being able to involve as large of an army as you can, if you will. The challenge is, I think I'm going back to the issue that Tiffani brought up, is that we also need senior leaders part of what we actually scare the senior leaders by just telling them, oh, don't micromanage. So they stop really asking questions. Oftentimes they feel like their job is to just motivate people, get people excited, and they don't have a clue about what goes on in their organizations. 2 level down, 3 level down, 4 level down. So it's important. I think this issue that you just brought up is very important, that we need to also make sure the senior leaders, the middle-level managers really know what goes on 2, 3, 4 levels below them. They go ask questions, not to really micromanage, but to be able to co-elevate the discussion and be able to both work together in a dialogue fashion. I call this kind of leadership mastery. I call this a player coach type of involvement. We talked about this last night with Tim Brown. So it's important that our leaders also kind of understand what goes on in their organization and hold them accountable.
Yeah, I'd say Tom Peters said it best: management by wandering around. Right? MBWA. Yes. Wait, you've got your question. Yes.
So my question is, I haven't heard the panel as yet really talk about humanity. So at the heart, core of every organization is a human being, and each human being has emotion. How do you bring out the emotion, or how do you align the emotion with the objectives of the company?
One of you will have to be able to respond because we've got a couple minutes left. We got one more question.
Let Tony answer.
Sure, yeah. Humanity is it's really important for us as a company because because we don't have management, every voice is critically important. And so I can't even tell you how many times we've changed things because one person out of 2,000 said, I want to change this. And people would say, that's a really good idea, really good idea. And that might get 40 emojis, like, let's do it. And then all of a sudden, that moment, it's done. Let's do it. We're changing. Let's do it. And so I think humanity is important because without people, to your point, and for us, without that mind and that heart to say, I want to be part of what's happening, it would be impossible for us to be the company that we are today. So I think that is a challenge for us, though. And this is, moving forward, our big challenge is how do we continue to make sure that we're a very employee-centric company that is constantly listening to our team members. We're kind of, this experiment is, where will we go? To be honest, I don't know. Because we're going to go where the crowd, the bicycle crowd, is going to take us. And that might be in a direction that we might have said 2 years ago, I don't want to go there. We don't want to go there. But we're going to go if that's where the crowd is going to move. So it's really important for us to continue to do that. And we are on this day, and I was telling a few people yesterday, we are beginning to lose that because now, and this is the pressure, there is some pressure now where people say, we need a leader. We need somebody from another company who came, but man, we just think they're going to screw it up. We think they're going to mess it up and say, we have brought in a few people from other companies, and they're struggling. They're not struggling with their intellect, their knowledge, their expertise. They're struggling to gain trust of the hearts of the team members and say, this doesn't seem right. And so we're really struggling with that, and I think that will be a big question for us in the next few years.
Well, we are down to 48 seconds. So I can't take another question, I'm sorry, because we got to keep this on time, right? Yeah. Yes?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, I just want to personally say thank you to everybody for joining us. I know that you had an option this morning. Thank you to this wonderful group. So let's give a hand to our panelists.
Thank you, guys.
And you're going to wrap us up?
Yes. What a wonderful first interactive sessions. Words like belonging, existential purpose, experiential learning, trust, transparency, and many more.